Zuco here with the birds. I'm just adjusting my. It's still cold outside, guys. Okay, it's still cold outside. I'm not wearing my coat anymore, but I still got my scarf on. Okay, Zuko back with the birds. We're talking today about Resto Shaman. I'm going to continue my series here on different builds for all the different classes, and we're looking ahead to 9.2, Shadowlands 9.2, but right now we're also in 9.1.5, and I'm going to tell you about some builds that are really, really good for Resto Shaman, and I'm going to look ahead to the future, and we're going to look at what's coming in 9.2, and I'm going to let you guys know what I think is going to be strong in 9.2 as well. There's two different sides of this that I want to tackle, okay? First, we're going to talk about healing. What legendary combinations are good for healing? If you're trying to do lots of throughput, we're going to talk about Raid and Mythic Plus. The second half we're going to talk about is what's good for damage for healing. Like as a healer, if you want to bring a bunch of damage, how do you do that? What's the best way to go about doing that in 9.2? Um, Lots of healers don't necessarily want to do damage, and I think that that's okay actually. I think that we have this pressure put on us, I think, from like the world first race and from all these top end guilds that like healers and tanks are just there to do as much damage as humanly possible while also like soaking up whatever damage is coming from the boss. And I just don't think that's always a good way to look at the game. Sometimes you really do need to have like people who are just dedicated healers and are pumping out throughput and they're keeping everybody else alive, and that allows you to continue to do damage that way. So let me talk for a second about the healing side of things. The trend that has developed in this entire expansion in Shadowlands that's different from Battle for Azeroth, which was the last expansion, is that we are focused very hard on Riptide. Very, very much so on Riptide and on basically spreading lots and lots of Riptides. And then a lot of the Resto Shamans have gone Necrolord in this expansion, which gives you the Primordial Wave that you can fire, and it helps to basically spread more Riptides. And then your Healing Wave, when you cast Healing Wave, it will cleave onto all those other targets. Let me just show you exactly what I'm talking about here. Give me 1 second. We're going to go here. Let's look at the browser. So what are we talking about? If you guys don't know, if you're just getting into Shaman, Necrolor, Primordial Wave, it says it blasts an ally with a Primordial Wave, which heals them over time, and then also puts a Riptide on them. And then the key part here is that your next healing wave will also hit all targets affected by your Riptide. So in a raid scenario, let's say, you can basically put a Primordial Wave out, put a Riptide out, put another Riptide out, and then just press Primordial Wave on those three targets. You can get usually maybe 3, 4, 5 Riptides out, 6 Riptides out before you have to essentially before they're going to run out of time, and then you can basically cleave all those targets with your healing wave, with the big healing wave. So that's like been a huge strategy, which it didn't exist in Battle for Azeroth, which is cool. It exists now, and a lot of them are also taking Primal Tidal Core. Every 4 casts of Riptide also applies a Riptide to another target. So you can see where this is going. You Primordial Wave one guy, puts a Riptide on him. You Riptide another one. You Riptide another one. Riptide another one. Riptide another one. And then this Primal Tidal Core will kick in, and now you have like 7 Riptides out, and you press them all. You press Healing Wave, and it hits all of them, which is really, really good. That's been the style that has developed in Shadowlands. We have really gone really far away from pressing Chain Heal. We don't press this button anymore. This used to be like the definitive build was like the High Tide Chain Heal Resto Shaman, and everybody's taking Wellspring now. Nobody is taking High Tide anymore. It's just sort of the meta that has developed, and that there's nothing wrong with that. I think that this is actually quite strong. Riptide got buffed, which is why it's been used a lot more. There's the Torrent talent is something that I've been taking more recently, which makes Riptide just like super strong. So that's kind of what's been happening. But and people have been taking a lot of the Primal Tidal Core for healing, and a lot of the other legendaries have just gone by the wayside for Resto Shaman. I'm telling you guys, I haven't seen really any other legendaries being utilized here. There's this Earth Shield legendary, which was supposed to be kind of cool, but it's basically just lackluster. This Jonats one, which is the Chain Heal legendary, Each healing wave and healing surge increases the healing done by your next chain heal. Interesting, kind of, except that you have to spend like 3, 4, 5 healing waves just to make your next chain heal do double the healing, right? If you did 5 healing waves, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, that's 100% more healing. It's okay, but like that takes so long. By the time you cast healing wave 5 times, whatever dangerous situation you were dealing with is probably over. And so then your chain heal will be used for nothing. So I'm not saying Jonats is bad, but it's just a little clunky, right? Compared to just like Riptide, 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 Healing Wave on all of them. Boom, everybody's fine. So why does this matter, this sort of style change? Well, because Blizzard is giving us tier sets in 9.2, guys, and the tier sets for Resto Shaman are very interesting. We're going to look at them. I've got them right here. Here they are right here. Let's look at this, okay? They are primarily focused on what? They're focused on Chain Heal. Chain Heal, critical hits, reduce the cooldown, remaining cooldown of Spirit Link by 2 seconds. Okay, that's kind of nuts. Potentially, I'll talk about it in a second. Chain Heal's critical hit chances increase by 30% on all targets it hits when you cast it on a person affected by your Riptide. So this is sort of a clunky sentence, but let me just break it down. The You want to Riptide one person, and then you cast Chain Heal on that one person, and then everybody else who gets hit by the Chain Heal, you have a 30% increased crit chance just because of the first person that has the Riptide on them. Every single person in the chain does not have to have Riptide on them. Just the first person that you cast this on has to have Riptide on them. Okay? So Chain Heal's crit is essentially always increased by 30%. If you're playing this correctly, then you want to make sure that you're always casting Chain Heal on the person who has Riptide, and then you boom, you have 30% crit chance with Chain Heal. And then obviously those Chain Heal crits will reduce the cooldown of Spirit Link. Okay, interesting. That's an interesting idea. Is that actually like good? And my initial thought would be to say it's not that great. It doesn't feel super good. Why? Because Spirit Link is a 3-minute cooldown, which is it's our big 3-minute cooldown. This is the biggest Resto Shaman cooldown. It's one of the best healing cooldowns in the game, guys. There's just nothing better really than Spirit Link. You can save your entire team with this button down here. What is sort of bad about this set bonus is that healing cooldowns are not like DPS cooldowns. DPS cooldowns, if you get them back faster, if you reduce the cooldown of DPS cooldowns, it's just a DPS increase. It's good. It's always good to get your cooldowns back. We were looking at Enhancement Shaman a couple of videos ago, and you can get your Feral Wolves cooldown to like to have them up permanently, or like the Elemental Shaman video I was showing where you can have your Fire Elemental up permanently. That's a good thing. It's just more damage, way more damage, and that's great. But like Resto healers don't always want to have the cooldown back on their major ability. It doesn't always matter. In particular in raid, usually in a raid scenario, these cooldowns are assigned. There is a time and a place when you are going to put down your link totem. You know, you're doing like maybe you're on Sylvanas and she's on the platforms at the end. If you guys have done the Sylvanas fight, you're at the phase 3 when you're on those platforms and she jumps up and starts doing like big AoE damage and you're like, everybody's gonna die. This is when we plan to have our spirit link down. Let's drop it to make sure everybody lives, right? There you go. We've just spent it. You don't want to just spend these cooldowns like willy-nilly. They're there to save people in really dire situations. And so to have a set bonus that reduces the cooldown of Spirit Link every time your chain heal crits is kind of okay, except that it might just be bad because maybe you reduce the cooldown of it, and instead of it being a 3-minute cooldown, it becomes like a 1.5-minute cooldown. Let's be generous here. Maybe it becomes a 1.5-minute cooldown, then that's great. You can use it twice as often. Maybe as you figure out the cooldown reduction of it, maybe that means that you do get to cast it twice as often, and it matters. It actually matters because the second time that you're casting it, people are also dying. But like, just because you have the cooldown of Spirit Link back doesn't mean you get to use it right away because maybe nobody's dying. In which case, there's no point in using it as opposed to a DPS cooldown where like every time the DPS cooldown comes off cooldown, you want to be using it. That's just the bottom line. Healing cooldowns tend to be more situational. They rely on people being dead or dying to use them. And so it's not always helpful to have um, the cooldown of it back. There's some fire going on. What's going on my screen? Anyway, so that's why I think this set bonus is interesting, but it's also not necessarily good. It might not be the greatest thing. What's also interesting about it is that it's going back to the chain heal um, meta, which again, there isn't really a good legendary that supports the chain heal meta. Healing wave and healing surge, like casting 5 healing wave and healing surges isn't always like the best. I understand you could just cast 1 healing wave, let's say, or 2, and you get a 40% boost in chain healing. Like maybe that's actually good enough. Like, so you don't have to spam 5 healing surges in a row and then cast a chain. You don't have to do that every single time. Maybe it's good enough to just get the 20% bonus or the 40% bonus or the 60% bonus and then be using your chain heal. And combining that with something like High Tide, maybe that's actually good enough to make this build work. To really lean in to the chain heal build to try and reduce the cooldown of Spirit Link Totem. Like, I like the idea. It's just that we don't always we haven't used chain heal in a while, and nobody uses Jonats. It's not always the best. Also, casting chain heals just to like try and reduce the cooldown of Spirit Link Totem, like to hope that you get a crit and then hopefully reduce the cooldown of Spirit Link Totem. That's so mana inefficient. It's so bad on your mana. Chain heal's 3,000 mana, right? Like that's my highest cost heal by far. Healing Surge is the closest. You know, there's just nothing that costs. Healing Rain is also kind of close, but it's 3,000 mana, guys. So like, excuse me. This idea that you maybe want to like cast Chain Heal as much as possible to get Chain Heal crits to reduce the cooldown of Spirit Link is an interesting idea, except that it costs so much mana to do so and is probably not going to be efficient, especially in Raid. You're never going to want to do that in Raid. The other added point of this is that you don't always just want to be casting Chain Heal. What if there's nobody that needs healing? What if there's no AoE healing that's needed right then? Then casting Chain Heal is a waste. So like, this tier set bonus of reducing the cooldown of Spirit Link Totem feels kind of bad to me in practice because it's very difficult to actually pull off. There's just not usually that much damage going out all the time in a fight that requires a chain heal to be healing it. Also, chain heal is expensive. We don't really want to be spamming it. Um, Also, Spirit Link Totem is situational, and we use it when people are basically about to die. Obviously, this would allow us to use it a lot more, and that's very cool, but like maybe you don't need to use it. Once again, maybe there's no damage going out for like 10 seconds or something, and you get Spirit Link off cooldown, and you're like, okay, I gotta use it like right now so that I can get the chain heal crits to reduce the cooldown. Like, you see what I'm saying? It's just not gonna line up super well. So the Riptide meta that we're kind of in right now is super mana efficient, and it actually heals for quite a bit. So like it's good, and this whole tier set coming from for Resto Shamans focusing back on Chain Heal. I love the idea. I want to focus on Chain Heal. I love the idea of focusing on Chain Heal, but it just feels like they should have went a different direction with this tier set. Maybe they should have went with like mana efficiency instead of crits or something. Like, I don't know. It should be like each target healed by Chain Heal refunds like 0.5% of your mana or something. I don't know. It should be something like that because like this is just sort of poorly designed, this set. Um, it feels like whoever designed this doesn't actually do a lot of healing because they would understand all the points that I've made, that like you don't want to be spamming chain heals, that you don't necessarily want the cooldown of Spirit Link to be back quicker than you're used to it being back. Maybe you have very regimented moments when you're going to use Spirit Link. You're like, okay, we're using Spirit Link when the Guardian uses this ability. We're using Spirit Link when he uses this ability, and we're using Spirit Link here. On Sylvanas, we're using it here, here, and here, and we can't use it anywhere else because we have other healing cooldowns that are all lined up. Do you see what I'm saying, guys? There's sort of a difficulty there. So that's the frustration with the healing stuff. In terms of um, that's just the tier set bonus. So a little bit disappointing. I hope that they maybe change it. Here's the second point I want to get to is legendaries in 9.2. We can obviously have 2 legendaries equipped, one Covenant legendary and one normal legendary. What does that mean? What are some of the better combinations for healing? Um, there's There's two that I'm looking at. Actually, uh, yes, there's about two that I'm looking at. The Necrolord one doesn't necessarily have any interesting synergies. If you're gonna go Necrolord anyway and focus on the Riptide build, all the more power to you. You're gonna get just a bonus of stats here. Each additional healing wave generated by Primordial Wave increases your haste by 8%. So that could be a lot of haste. Let's say that you send out a Riptide, and then you get a proc of the Primal Tattle Core, and then you cast your Primordial Wave. Let's say you have 6 Riptides out, and then you Healing Wave 6 people. That's 6 times 8% haste, right? That's 48% haste, right? Do the math right? Um, for 10 seconds, that's a crazy amount. That's a crazy amount of haste. So nothing wrong with this. This is like an interesting. You can get a whole bunch of haste, potentially Mythic Plus. Maybe that's very good. In raid, that's not always the best because you don't want to be spending mana as much, but very, very good in Mythic Plus, I think. Seeds of Rampant Growth. This is interesting. Excuse me. In that it's going to reduce the cooldown of Healing Tide Totem. And I initially thought this was bad because it only gives 5 seconds per tick. If you guys don't know, Fey Transfusion ticks 6 times, right? 6 times. 6 times 5 is 30, so you get 30 seconds off of your Healing Tide Totem. Healing Tide Totem is a 3-minute cooldown, okay? So here's what you would do. You would cast Healing Tide Totem, then you would Fey Transfuse right away. You would get 30 seconds off of your Healing Tide Totem. So now it's at 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Your Fey Transfusion cooldown is a 1.5-minute cooldown because there's a Conduit that you're going to take that reduces the cooldown of it by 30 seconds. Let me just show you that really quick. It's over here. It's over here. Shaman, here it is right here. Essential Extraction. Fey Transfusion cooldown is reduced by 25 seconds. That goes up to like 30, 33, 34 seconds. That's what you're looking at, okay? So you press Healing Tide Totem, you Fey Transfuse. Your Fey Transfusion is only a minute and a half cooldown. So you'll get it back again before Healing Tide Totem comes back. You Fey Transfuse a second time, and then your Healing Tide Totem will almost be back. You're going to reduce Healing Tide Totem's cooldown by a minute, by 1 minute in total, before it comes back. Again, same thing with the Spirit Link problem. What if there's no healing that needs to be done when you get your Healing Tide Totem back? Like, sure, you can just plop it down for fun when it comes off cooldown, but it's just not like a DPS cooldown. You might not need to plop it down right on like on CD. So like this could just sort of be bad. Again, if your raid's taking tons of damage, then great. Both of these ideas of reducing the cooldown of Spirit Link Totem with the tier set, and then this whole thing here, reducing Fey Transfusion, reducing the cooldown of your Healing Tide Totem. Those are wonderful things. Except that like if you don't need the healing, then it's actually just strictly bad because it means that you're not going to be getting that bonus. The cooldown reduction goes to waste. So I like this idea of Seeds of Rampant Growth legendary, but like maybe it's just not going to be actually helpful depending on sort of how it lines up. The crit is good. Obviously, the crit is very good. Getting 26 times force, 24% crit is never bad on a healer. It's always very, very good. The other legendary, the Kyrian one, sorry, I'll look really quick. The Kyrian one has always just been good. It has no real synergies at all, but it's just very good. The damage you can pump with this thing, if you take Mechanicos, it's absurd, man. It's just crazy. The damage is nuts. And the healing is also quite strong. You have to move the totem around a little bit to try and get the healing to land where you want it to heal, so it's a little bit of a micromanaging, but once you get the hang of it, it's very, very good. This is a good ability. If you just want to go Kyrian and pump damage and pump healing, this might be the highest DPS option for you. Okay, it's very, very good. We'll get to it in a minute when we talk about damage. Here's the other one that's kind of synergistic, okay? This is the elemental conduit one. Again, 5 friendly targets healed by chain harvest will have the Riptide cast on them. I've tested this in a raid scenario. They don't even have to actually get healed. It just has to touch 5 friendly targets. It doesn't even have to actually produce a heal onto them. They will automatically get the cast of the Riptide. So this is a good one. This could work really, really well with your Primal Tattle Core. Again, if you just want to go Riptide crazy and take Torrent, which makes Riptide heal for 20% more. The upfront heal of Riptide is 20% stronger. This works with that. Look at the wording of this. Up to 5 friendly targets healed by Chain Harvest will have Riptide cast on them. This torrent affects the upfront cast of Riptide, meaning you will get a 20% stronger cast of Riptide, which is 3,400 healing upfront and another 3k over time. It's so good, guys. It's so ridiculously strong. It's a 6k heal um, over the 18 seconds. But there's some synergies here with Primal Tidal Core and then this. I think this is fine. You could take these two. I think the Elemental Conduit putting 5 Riptides out is just very, very, very strong. It's really good in Mythic Plus because the damage is also crazy. But um, it doesn't. There's not a lot of synergies. The only real synergy here is with Primal Tidal Core because I do believe that when you cast, obviously I don't know, I haven't seen this interaction yet because I can't test it. But here's what I'm guessing. When you cast Chain Harvest and it puts 5 Riptides out, it's going to automatically put an additional Riptide out if you have Primal Tidal Core on, because every 4 casts of Riptide also puts an additional Riptide out, right? So I believe those two are going to work together, but I don't know. The other thing is this. Sorry, this is the other one that's interesting, and I actually like this a lot. Casting Riptide is a 7% chance to activate Ascendance. So if you press Chain Harvest, it's going to cast Riptide 5 times. Remember, guys, so important, the wording. It's going to cast Riptide 5 times, which I believe gives you 5 chances to activate Ascendance. Again, I can't actually test this yet because we're not in 9.2, but I'm going to be trying it when we get there. So there's some synergies here with Elemental Conduit that I think are really great. The rest of them don't have very many synergies. There's the haste buff from this one, which I think is going to be great. It's just a stat stick. The Kyrian one is just a ton of damage. The Seed one does help you get the healing Tide Totem down by about a minute, but like it might not matter. It might not matter if you don't actually need the healing. So let's talk quickly about damage. I want to talk about damage because I think that in 9.2, healers are going to have access to some ridiculous amounts of damage, and in particular, Resto Shaman will be at the top of that list. So forget about the healing for now. Let's just look at damage. And I want to look at, again, we're looking at legendary combinations. What gets us the most damage? Well, again, Elemental Conduit, we get 5 Flame Shocks, which is really just solid damage. You can combine that with Deep Tremor Stone, guys. Here's what you're going to want to do as a Resto Shaman. If you want to do the most damage that you possibly can in a Mythic Plus in particular, but also in a raid, but let's focus just on Mythic Plus. Deep Tremor Stone with any of these other ones, any of the Covenant legendaries, is going to be a ridiculous amount of damage. Okay, if you take this one, you're going to get 5 Flame Shocks, which is so much damage, guys. Flame Shock does like 4,000 damage. That's 20,000 damage in Flame Shocks. If you take the Vesper Totem one, you're going to get a huge chunk of burst damage. Once Vesper Totem is done doing all of its damage, you get another chunk of damage. If you take the Seed one, you're going to get a bunch of crit from Fate Transfusion, which is going to help you with the Earthquake damage that's going to be coming out. And if you take the Primordial Wave one, you're just getting a huge amount of haste, which lets you do a bunch of damage. But I think the Kyrian one in particular, and then the Elemental Conduit one, are both the best contenders for the damage. Look at this, guys. Right now, I have the Earthquake Legendary equipped. This basically says Earth Elemental has a permanent Earthquake attached to it. Watch the damage that we're going to pump out here without even having 2 legendaries. We only have 1 legendary right now. Here's what we're going to do. Boom. Let's do this. Let's get our boy out. Let's do Chain Harvest. Look at my damage right now. Watch my damage. 9, 10k, 11k. We're going to cap out probably at about 10 or 11k. Like, this is stupid, guys. This is crazy burst damage in a Mythic Plus because of the Earthquake being attached to the Earth Ellie. Now, obviously, that's a 5-minute cooldown. Earth Ellie is a 5-minute cooldown, so I understand that it's not going to be up all the time. But every other pack, you're going to have this, and you're just going to have a monstrous amount of damage. 11k as a healer. I'm doing 11k as a healer in AoE. It's just like, this is ridiculous. In Mythic Plus, this is the way to go. This is just with the 1 legendary. Imagine if I also was adding 5 Flame Shocks when I cast the Chain Harvest. Or what if I had the burst out of the Vesper Totem? Or what if I was getting all the crit from the Seeds of Rampant Growth, okay? You guys can understand what's happening here. This is, if you're looking to do damage as a Resto Shaman in Mythic Plus in particular, this is the way to go. You want to combine any of these other 4 Covenant legendaries with Deep Tremor Stone. It's just going to be like the highest DPS by far. I don't even think it's going to be close. Um, yeah, I think that it's just going to be really, really good. So, yeah, that's basically my summary, guys, on Resto Shaman moving into 9.2. Right now, some of these things are quite strong. If you're in Mythic Plus and as Resto Shaman and you've never looked at this legendary for the Earthquake, for the Earth Elemental, it's very good. Let's look at our damage breakdown really quick. Earthquake did 51% of our damage. It did 343,000 damage to that pack while the Earth Elemental was up. Like it's it's very 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 good. If you want to do lots of damage as a Resto Shaman, this is definitely the way to go. In 9.2, you're going to get some more options here for damage. I think that the Venthyr or the Kyrian one are the best two for damage. If we're looking at the synergies, on the healing side, guys, really quickly, I think that the Venthyr option with deeply rooted elements might be a cool combination. You might be able to get multiple procs of Ascendance, which if you remember, Ascendance for Resto is very, very strong because it has an immediate heal of 14. This is about 15k. And then on top of that, it's going to duplicate all the healing that you're doing. Very strong. Very good cooldown now. So if you combine these two together, you might get chances to proc Ascendance. If you combine Elemental Conduit with Primal Tattle Core, you're going to get a bunch of extra Riptides going out for free, which is very good. And if you really do want to try the tier set bonus that they're bringing us with the chain heal, you could try to go Jonats plus just about anything else here. Jonats plus seed maybe, or Jonats plus elemental conduit. But you could try to go for a chain heal build, and you just kind of weave in the healing waves and healing surges to buff your next chain heal. But ultimately, guys, the tier set bonus, I think it's kind of weak, and that's really, really disappointing. I want Chain Heal to be good. Don't get me wrong. I want it to be good, but it's not that strong right now. And to reduce the cooldown of Spirit Link Totem could be useless. It could ultimately just be useless. If your team has designed the healing cooldowns in a way where you can't utilize it, it could be useless. If you get the cooldown of Spirit Link back because of your chain heal casts, but you have no opportunity to really use it because there's not enough damage going out, that could also just be kind of frustrating. Or let's say you use Spirit Link on cooldown because you're doing this whole build where you reduce the cooldown of it, so you want to use it as soon as it comes up, and then you don't when you use it, there's not really a lot going on, and then you need it like a minute later, and it's not off cooldown yet because you used it too early, and then everybody dies because you didn't have it when you were supposed to. There's just situations like that that could be very bad. So I hope the tier set bonus kind of gets changed, but the double legendaries are looking pretty cool for Resto Shaman. I think that there's lots of synergies there that you guys can work with. So let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know what you guys think about Resto Shaman heading into 9.2, and we'll see you in the next video.